The reason the US birth rate is at an all-time low is because feminism lied to women and told them that having babies is bad, that babies themselves are a burden. But without God, we worship a false idol. It's usually materialism or worship of self.
No one's having kids. Do you know how hard you need to abuse a mammal to make them not have children?
It costs £46.62 to stand outside and do nothing on a good day.
People our age can barely afford to live for themselves.
I can't pay my rent.
Having a child in this economy literally means you get a box of diapers and one bag for $185.
I don't want to have kids because I fear like I can't provide the life that my parents gave me.
The top 10% drive nearly half of consumer spending. Meanwhile, households are dealing with rising rent and record credit card debt, layoffs, and barely keeping up with the cost of living.
So thinking about bringing a child into that, where it's like, yeah, hey kid, welcome to the world. Don't know what to tell you. Hope it works out for you.
Welcome to the year 2060, where the impacts of Gen Z's resistance to parenthood are starting to unfold. Job postings sit stagnant for months, hospitals and care homes are overflowing with patients, and social programs, pensions, and public services that rely on a steady stream of workers and taxpayers are under pressure. All because the up-and-coming generation is too small to support the workforce. Essentially, Gen Z's choice to go child-free wasn't just them keeping their peace. No, they inevitably reshaped the capacity of society itself, putting our countries at risk of total collapse. At least, that's what the headlines are saying. Between Elon Musk calling it one of the biggest risks to civilization, and Fox News crying out that this isn't just a lifestyle choice by Gen Z, it's a looming demographic crisis for the country, and a crisis of Gen X parents awaiting grandkids. Priorities, I guess. Anyway, let me tell you, something about all this feels very fishy. Like, you're telling me that it comes down to this one generation to repopulate, otherwise we're all screwed? I mean, between the tech advancements we're seeing and the often overlooked benefits of a smaller population, it just doesn't seem like that big of a deal that they aren't having kids. And listen, if you don't already know, I am a mother of 2 little boys and a big advocate for having kids. They are my pride and joy, as cheesy as it is. That doesn't mean that everyone should have them, especially in today's day and age. Like, you're actually telling people to bring kids into the same world as the Epstein files? Bold choice. But that's what we're going to dissect today, not the Epstein files, dear God.
How many people are scared? Me too.
But why Gen Z is going child-free, the benefits society may gain because of it, and why it might not matter either way. So the spark for this video came about because I keep hearing people online spreading this narrative that Gen Z is selfish for not having kids, even with everything that's going on in the world. But it is true that roughly 39% of Gen Z said that they had delayed having a child because of the current economic climate, while only 36% of millennials said the same.
Well, honey, with the bonus I made this year, looks like we got a good head start in our kids' college fund. Future is bright.
Hey chat, how far away from a nuclear bomb do you have to be to survive the blast radius?
Hey, that's a serious one.
To lay the groundwork for this, let's go through all the hurdles Gen Z has to jump through to even consider parenthood. For one, we have to mention housing, of course.
This 2-bed, 1-bath house has insane aura. What do you do for work?
I make AI brain rot YouTube shorts.
Does that pay good?
Which I realize we did just talk about a couple videos ago, but we haven't yet discussed how it pertains to parenthood. Because housing isn't just a nice to have, it plays a role in the way people grow their families. While yes, of course you can have kids as a renter, it does make some aspects harder. Because sure, it's all fine and dandy to live under the reign of a landlord when you're childless, and the flexibility of life can even be a perk, but throwing kids into the mix means that you're subjecting them to that unpredictability. Obviously, not an end-all be-all. A lot of people have kids in rentals, but it's worth noting that most people prefer the stability of homeownership when they have kids, knowing that you can't just be kicked out at any point. On top of that, rentals have just gotten so expensive that many people feel limited in their smaller spaces at record high rental rates. Across the US, the average rent for a studio apartment listed on apartments.com in October was $1,700 a month, and a 2-bedroom space had an average rent of $1,900 $200 per month. And that's just the average, right? When looking at popular cities, the rent gets quite atrocious. Like for $2,000, you can get an average of 267 square feet in New York City. So even if you want kids, you probably feel limited because you're priced out of moving into a bigger space. Because again, while you can have 4 kids sharing one room in a 2-bedroom apartment, most people just don't want to do that as it adds so much more stress trying to juggle that many kids and all their separate sleep needs in one room.
You soaked his underwear in meat.
I have 2 kids in one room, and let me tell you, it's not that easy. So that's housing. As we know, a dumpster fire. Moving on to groceries, the cost of food at home has climbed 28.3% since January 2020, which I think a lot of people would say is conservative. There's even stories online of people finding old receipts showing that it's more like a 100% increase. And the thing is, that gets expensive very quickly when you start adding more mouths to feed in your household, because as much as you can cut costs in parenthood by thrifting clothes and taking all the hand-me-down gear and shopping sales for diapers, at the end of the day, these are hungry buggers and you're not allowed to not feed them. Food costs make up the second largest expense to raise a child at 18%. There are many factors that can influence this expense: choosing to eat more healthily, purchasing formula for babies, your child's age, eating at home versus eating out, and more. But on average, you can expect to pay around $3,377 each year on food. So for a family with 2 kids, that's an extra $560 a month on groceries alone. And that's been just a big deterrent for people deciding to have kids or more kids, because when your toddler is eating the equivalent of 1 year's retirement savings in blueberries every week, you start to question whether you can afford this.
Oh gosh. I think it's probably going to be something like, I don't know, at least $600 billion.
And I'm being so for real between all the jokes, because while you can cut costs of groceries, there's only so much you can do before you start sacrificing on quality. I mean, I only have 2 little boys, but I dread the day when they're teenagers and start raiding the cupboards every week. I should honestly start saving for that now that you mention it. But to share some firsthand insight from Gen Z, Alice Jackson, aged 23, says here, even as someone who frequently romanticized the idea of being an adult, I'm probably more likely to fly to the moon than to have children at the age of 23 or 25 or 28 for that matter. And not because I had to call my mom yesterday to ask how to turn up the heating in my rented flat. The cost of living crisis has me gawking at the price of yogurt, let alone the price of childcare. Graduate jobs are few and far between, and the impossibility of owning a home large enough for a child to live in verges on comical. As Alice mentioned, we do need to talk about childcare and the support system Gen Z has awaiting them in parenthood, which, as it turns out, isn't looking good. All Gen Z has to do is look over at their millennial role models to see that most of them are just toughing it out on their own with no village in sight. As said by this millennial parent, after talking with some of my friends, I realized I wasn't alone. Many of us shared similar experiences of feeling overwhelmed and undersupported. We laughed at how we had imagined our parents, once they became grandparents, would step in with open arms, offering help. And sure, some people are still getting that kind of support from their parents, but for many of us, it seemed like our parents were wrapped up in their own lives, busy with work or enjoying their retirement.
I love when boomer grandparents are like, why don't you come visit us more often? You know, we're here, we're waiting for you, we got the space. Yo, you're retired. What the hell are you doing? Come to us, no.
This so-called grandparent epidemic is a new problem for young generations, where it was once expected that grandparents would step in. Now that support is a rare luxury, which, to be fair, isn't anyone's fault in particular. Rather, there's a conglomeration of factors pulling family members apart, between the rise in family estrangement as more Gen Z set healthy boundaries, the high cost of living forcing young people to move further away to more affordable areas, and also just the fact that inflation affects older populations as well. Many of them are forced to work longer than they'd like, meaning that even if they want to be involved with their grandkids, their time and availability is limited. Many of today's grandparents, especially those of millennials and younger Gen Xers, are still deep in their own careers. They're not the relaxed, retired grandparents of the past. Instead, they're juggling jobs, mortgages, and rising living costs just like the rest of us. Many grandparents today don't have the luxury of early retirement or the financial stability their own grandparents may have enjoyed. It all adds up to the fact that many of Gen Z, if they choose to have kids, will be left to figure out childcare on their own. And when the only option is for one parent to give their entire year's salary over to a daycare facility, as childcare costs in the United States range from under $8,000 annually in Mississippi up to $24,000 in Massachusetts. You know what I'm saying. I'm Canadian. I never say that word. Now, even after all this, I'm sure many people will still think, well, anyone can make it work and these are just excuses to not have kids. And to that I say, yes, you can have a good life on low income, but knowingly giving your child a stressful life isn't a great option. I just heard a Gen Z say online, I don't want to have kids just so they can starve with me. And I don't think you can argue with that.
Amazing news, everyone. We are the richest country in the history of the world. Yeah, so we've heard. Can we have healthcare? No, that would never work. Can we have affordable housing? Why would we do that when there's private equity? What about public transportation? Well, think of the auto industry. Come on. Can we have childcare and parental leave? No, we're gonna need you to get back to work. Can we raise the minimum wage? You already get $7 an hour. Don't be so greedy.
But at the end of the day, the saddest part of all of this is that a lot of Gen Zers do want kids and wish they had the resources to do so. Among Gen Z, just 1 in 10 has had a baby by the age of 23. That's despite the fact that 61% of Gen Zs say they'd like to have children in the future. So I would argue that Gen Z isn't being selfish at all. In fact, they may be the first generation to actually think things through before just jumping into having kids. But it's not all about money. Gen Z is also increasingly prioritizing their overall wellness when making major life decisions. No previous generation has cared so much about their mental health, physical fitness, and work-life balance in this stage of life. And many want to feel like their best selves before taking on the enormous responsibility of raising a child, which is why Factor, today's sponsor, resonates so strongly with them. If you haven't heard of Factor, they deliver fresh, never frozen, chef-crafted, and dietitian-approved meals straight to your doorstep, ready to eat in just 2 minutes. They're specifically designed to support your wellness journey by helping to eliminate stress around cooking, planning, or cleanup so you can stay focused on your goals. You guys already know that I hate cooking. Like, I'll do it, but I'm not happy about it. And so any way I can get around the labor of cooking while still getting the benefits of real food and real ingredients, I'm here for it. And Factor is really just as simple as heat, eat, and enjoy in just 2 minutes with no prep and no cleanup. And the food is delicious as well, as they have over 100 rotating weekly options, from meals and salads to breakfasts, shakes, and more, all crafted for great taste. Nutrition is just as important as flavor with Factor, as everything is made without refined seed oils, refined sugars, or artificial colors or sweeteners. So if you want to try out Factor, just head to Factor75.com or click the link below and use code EMBERSFB50 to get 50% off your first Factor box, plus a free breakfast for a year. That's code EMBERSFB50 at Factor75.com to get 50% off, plus the free breakfast for a year. The offer is only valid to new Factor customers with the code and qualifying auto-renewing subscription purchases. Okay, so Gen Z isn't having kids, and all the headlines are screaming about the doom this will bring. But it might not be as catastrophic as they make it out to be, because it's just not as simple as the population will collapse, especially when there's more players in the game. But let's get into those concerns. So to start, one of the biggest problems with the declining birth rate is the impact on the job market and overall productivity.
The fundamental constraint is labor. There are not enough people. I can't emphasize this enough. There are not enough people.
This is because when there aren't enough people to fill jobs, entire industries can shut down, or in critical areas, remaining workers become overwhelmed and productivity suffers. As said here, if trends continue on their present path, demographers warn there won't be enough people to work to support society. The extreme labor shortages would lead to stagnation, poverty, and ultimately, in the most dire scenarios, the collapse of civilization itself. Again, a little extreme if you ask me, me, but I will allow it given the nature of my channel. Along with that, there's the problem of the aging population not receiving the care they need, because as generations reach retirement age, the next generation becomes responsible to care for that older population. And so when Gen Z goes child-free, we won't have anyone to take on these essential roles. If only there was an alternative to humans doing all that work. Oh wait, there is. AI. AI has already come to the rescue, taking all our jobs, whether we like it or not. So it's a non-issue, right? To clarify, yes, I also did just talk about this a few videos ago, about how AI isn't the main contributor to the job market crisis right now. But that doesn't mean that AI won't pull itself up by the bootstraps and come for all our jobs in the next 10, 20, or 30 years. There are repeated warnings that artificial intelligence could take most or even all jobs. Anthropic CEO recently predicted that AI would eliminate 50% of entry-level white-collar jobs within the next 5 years. Because as much as we all want to deny AI coming for our jobs, at the rate we're going, give it a couple decades and we'll all be hooped. Side note, it's actually really funny when you ask someone whether they think AI will take all the jobs, because they always say yes, but never their own job. Like, as a last resort of self-preservation, we all delude ourselves into thinking that everyone else is screwed, but your own job is the exception.
But the catch is, closers cannot be AI.
Just a fun survival tactic. Anyway, while we're all shaking in our boots, awaiting our final days in our careers, for Gen Beta, born 2025 and ongoing, this is the best case scenario for them. Because when the population collapses to minuscule numbers, it's finally their turn to get a job in 2040 or 2050. They're going to be laughing their way onto whatever position is open that they feel like picking up. Now, yes, this is speculative, and there are a lot of moving parts involved in the timing of the birth rate collapse, lining up with AI taking over tasks simultaneously. But it does mean that the birth rate isn't necessarily as big of an issue as it's being sold to us.
Today's news cycle could be like the birth rate's plummeting. We won't have enough people in the workforce like Japan, followed by in 10 years, AI will replace 90% of workers, and climate change is irreversible. And I'm like, so do you want me to multiply or off myself? I felt like you're giving me mixed messages.
The fear that aging societies are destined for decline is widespread, but it's not well supported by evidence. Aging can be linked to increased long-term investment in technology and infrastructure, pointing to countries like Japan and Germany. These nations show that while shrinking working age populations can strain public budgets through rising healthcare and pension costs and make it harder for businesses to find workers, they don't inherently lead to economic disaster. Basically, if we stay true to the path we're on, and as the decades pass by, we offload our productivity to AI through agents and robots, then we literally don't need to worry about this in the best case scenario. So actually, it would be in our best interest if we lay off the gas a little bit on the whole reproducing thing, because we're already so scared our careers aren't going to exist in another 10 years. Because as much as I don't want to bring back AI Ashley, she is coming for my job nonetheless. Another side note, I am sorry to everyone who said that they got a jump scare from AI Ashley in that video. It's how normal it already feels. I want you to know that I hated making her probably as much as you hated seeing her. But the moral of the story is that we're going to need a smaller workforce anyway, unless we all get on board with universal basic income, which in my opinion is the most dystopian worst case scenario. So I'd rather not.
They say AI is taking our jobs, so I'm taking AI's. This is day one of becoming a meal delivery service robot.
But moving on from AI, the other relief we're expected to feel from a declining population is housing costs. Yay! Finally, some good news about housing, that it will only take an entire generation dying off and not being replaced for Gen Z to be able to buy a 2-bedroom fixer-upper from the 80s. Now, again, to clarify, these are all very complicated, multifaceted issues, so there isn't one clear outcome of what would happen to houses if there were less people, but it's hard to argue with less people equals less buyers equals lower prices. It's simple economics, my dear. But actually, as seen here, the knee-jerk reaction to slowing or negative population growth is to think that prices are going to come down. It's an understandable reaction, but historically, the immediate correlation between housing prices and population growth hasn't been as strong as one might expect. So yes, other influences like booming economies, interest rates, foreign investors, or policy changes can all counter the population collapse, but it at least relieves some of the pressure on the market, making the chance of a more affordable housing future slightly more possible. Yes, that does mean it won't directly impact Gen Z necessarily, but think of all the hypothetical children that won't have to pay today's equivalent of $1 million just to buy in the city. We even have examples of places around the world going through this exact issue, and so we can get some insight from it, like Japan, who is currently amidst the battle of shrinking birth rates. They say about their housing situation, given that population losses have been and are projected to be more acute in rural areas than urban areas in Japan, the ongoing demographic transition in Japan could worsen regional disparities, as falling house prices in rural areas could intensify population outflows. Policy measures to promote more even population growth across regions and avoid the oversupply of houses are critical to stabilize house prices with a shrinking population. Basically, in the rural areas where people are leaving in droves, the prices are falling while the cities are holding steady, which doesn't sound that bad.
This January at Davos, Japan had its own spotlight session called Japan's Turn, and the tone was actually surprisingly optimistic. Minister Katayama-san talked about $330 billion in planned AI and semiconductor investment. Hori-san from Globus pointed out the Nikkei had tripled in 5 years, and companies just posted record profits for the 5th year running. Wages are up over 5%. So they're framing this as Japan's comeback story.
Again, with the best case scenarios, what we'll probably see is just that prices will stagnate, which is good that no one will lose out on their investments. But as incomes rise, those Gen Betas won't even know how good they have it when the detached house becomes attainable again. To close this chapter out, I want to include all the honorary mentions of other ways life may become better for everyone. Starting off strong, we of course have the environment. It's so funny that overpopulation and its impact on the environment was the hottest topic in the 2010s, that we were doing irreparable damage to the planet just by existing here. But now pretty much no one cares about it. Slight exaggeration, but no one's talking about it. We did get to see a glimmer of hope though for the environment in 2020. I'm sure we all remember how nature filled our streets and bodies of waters again when we were forced to stay inside. Like, it really opens your eyes to how badly we've screwed up this world. Moving on, let's look at the school system, as we have an epidemic of overcrowded schools and the mass exodus of teachers who are fed up with Gen Alpha. Just look at this article where they say they had to use the principal's office as a classroom. A New Jersey school is sending kids to the principal's office, not because they're in trouble, but because it's an actual classroom. Sunnymead Elementary School in Hillsborough Township is so overcrowded, Principal Tammy Jenkins gave up her room 5 years ago to help with the lack of space. Well, give it a couple of decades and we could have underpopulated classrooms where kids actually get the attention and help they need. What a concept. To wrap up this section, we know that resources will stretch further, infrastructure would be less crowded, and you probably didn't think about this, but there will be less traffic. That alone makes it worth it. So yeah, despite all the fear-mongering, it's starting to feel like just not that big of a deal. Like, we will prevail and some things might even get better because of it. So thanks, Gen Z. Okay, so I am now starting to realize that this may be sounding like an infomercial for not having kids. Like, just look how clean the streets will be. And that's not what I mean, obviously. I'm just trying to counter how dire we're told things are. Especially if it were really that bad, wouldn't policymakers do more to boost birth rates other than just handing out $5,000 checks? These are the questions to ponder over. So now I want to get into the fact that the birth rate is kind of irrelevant to the problems people will face in the future, however few of them there may be. I also want to note that population decreasing has literally been going on for generations, and it's only now that people care because we've dropped below replacement value. If you didn't know, we need every couple to have 2.1 kids to maintain population, and the 0.1 is to make up for losses along the way. Super sad, but anyway, basically, as technology has advanced, birth rates decrease as we become less reliant on children for our survival. Quite a lot of academic literature has shown that the adoption of the television and other media led to lower birth rates around the world. There were a couple of mechanisms at work here. First, people could see different lifestyles to emulate. Famously in Brazil, telenovas showed much smaller family norms, and this caused birth rates to fall. Second, people just had something else to do with their time. It's just funny that when we were so worried about overpopulation and the environment, no government body did anything. But now that the economy is jeopardized, they're throwing money at us, trying to go back to the 8 billion people good old days.
I want more babies in the United States of America.
Do I want to have a baby for you, the American government? No. No, thank you. I'm good.
Here's the thing though, even if AI doesn't completely take over, I don't really think the birth rate is that impactful on the economy, because we just have to look around at our current economic standings to see that the average person isn't making much of a difference. Like, yes, a lot of small businesses are struggling, but despite consumer spending being a big part of GDP, we haven't had a recession yet, even though people can't afford their basic needs. And why is that? That's right, it's because we're in a K-shaped economy where a small group of high earners are spending enough to make up for the rest of the population's poverty.
This is what happens after a crisis when one group rises faster, so wealth is growing for them, stocks are surging, assets are appreciating, and another group falls further into stagnancy, debt, and instability. It's the same country, the same system, supposedly, producing two completely different economic realities.
The net worth of America's top 1% hit a record share of nearly 32% in the third quarter of 2025. By comparison, the bottom 50% cumulatively held 2.5% of overall net wealth. So one rich consumer can replace several middle-income consumers in spending power. And when that's the case, it doesn't matter so much how many people there are when we're talking about commerce, because as long as the final tally is in the green, we don't need a larger, lower class of spenders.
I'd say the economy is 10 times its current size in 10 years.
It's like how Airbnb used to be an affordable option for travel for most middle-class people, but now you can't stay anywhere for under $200 a night, which when that first started happening, I was like, how on earth are these people staying in business? Well, as it turns out, all this means is that they can have less bookings, but at higher prices to keep the lights on. And so the higher class society will happily dish out the extra costs because they can afford it and keep Airbnb trucking along just fine. All the while, the lower class is completely cut off from the service.
We're paying $500 US a night for this unit, and this is probably the most horrific Airbnb that I've ever been to.
In the same way, while consumer spending is largely down, enough higher income households are spending away, keeping total revenue and GDP from collapsing. Now, at the end of the day, K-shaped economies are seen as normal and cyclical and usually happen because of recessions, because those are the hardest times on the middle class and lower class people. But as many economists are saying, this time is different. That we've been brewing this cocktail of automation and AI, rising asset prices rather than wages, and just high barriers to upward mobility, meaning it's going to be a lot harder to get out of this one. Economists now warn that this two-speed economic structure is a core feature rather than a passing fad within the world's largest economy. This is not a cyclical or temporary phenomena. This is a structural, fundamental issue. So even if there may be some relief in the future, we would need a drastic restructuring of the labor market, the tax system, and social safety systems to recover. Which sounds extreme, yes, but when CEOs and politicians are happy because everything on paper looks good, then they don't need to worry about whether the lower class is contributing to the economy enough. Hell, even the one thing that they really do care about, our taxes, is changing too, as economists and politicians are debating ways for AI companies to make up for tax revenue lost when human jobs disappear. All this to say that the birth rate is in a lot of ways irrelevant to the economic future because they're phasing out our participation in it anyway. As long as AI makes up the difference, we will amount to nothing more than eyes to sell ads to and data to mine from, I guess. It all just seems a little silly to be telling people that they need to have kids when there aren't going to be many opportunities in the future for them anyway. That's a hard sell if you ask me. Okay, final thoughts. As you can expect, I think that this is all just so silly, and we shouldn't be pushing kids on people who don't want them. Especially again, I am a huge advocate for having kids. I think it's the best decision we ever made, but it's very understandable why people wouldn't want to have them in today's day and age. So if we're really that desperate, there are plenty of people from around the world who would love nothing more than to immigrate into our country to fill the gaps. So what's the problem? Anyway, that is all I have for you today. Make sure you subscribe and check out the merch. All the proceeds go to the SA Foundation. And I hope you have as many children as you desire, I guess. Bye.
I feel like it's not ethical to have kids.
It's morally with what's going on in the world.
Astrologically, toss up.
Total.
If it's Gemini, no.
Goodbye.
I
read it's either one of those things where you have to have none or 3. You can have up to 5, but 2 of them have to be gay.
But is it ethical? If the music in my house that I play is really fun?
Chappell says kids are cringe.
Okay, so ethically, no kids.
So only Republicans have kids then.
We're having kids.